That evening, I was greeted in a completely different way than I expected. The house was quiet, and neither my wife Helen nor my children were visible. Helen and I, Mike Lewis, have been married 11 years. Deciding that the house was quiet, I saw a note on the table. "Mike, I'm sorry I can't tell you this in person, but I'm too much of a coward to face you. I met someone else and fell in love. My children are with me and safe. The divorce papers are in the envelope underneath this note. As you can see, I'm not asking for anything." Helen, needless to say, my day and my life went up in smoke in a matter of minutes. I rushed around the kitchen, cursing, looking through divorce papers, and finally collapsed in a chair. Helen left me the house and all our money, and took only clothes for herself and the children, plus their toys. The part that really angered me was the last one. Helen wanted me to sign papers for my children so they could be adopted by her new man. It's like this was meant to happen. At least it let me know who Helen left me for, Henry Carslake. I called my future ex-wife. "Hello, Mike." "To hell with hi, Mike. What the hell is going on, Helen?" "As I already said in my note, I met someone else and fell in love with him." "Yes, sure. No one just leaves a marriage and sleeps with a guy. At least it lets me know that you two had sex. I just hope it wasn't in our bed." "No, please stop swearing and behave in a civilized manner," Helen replied. "Civilized? Fuck civilization. You can get a divorce and stay with the asshole, but I will not give up my children for adoption. Tell Mr. Big Shot he can go to hell." I hung up. After taking a shower and changing clothes, I went to eat, since I wasn't in the mood to cook. The food was okay, after which I decided to go to the bar and have a couple of drinks. Considering that today was a mess, I decided that I was owed that much. The man for whom my wife left me was the owner of the Carslake Construction Company. I had done some work for his company in the past, but now everything was about to change. My friend Paul noticed me at the bar. "I don't see you here often, Mike. Did you manage to escape from your family for the evening?" "Something like that, Paul." I returned to an empty house with a package of divorce papers. "Is Helen divorcing you?" "Damn, I didn't expect that." "Me too, Paul." "Me too. She moved in with Henry Carslake." "What? You mean Henry Carslake from Carslake Construction?" "Yes, exactly him. I think she fell in love with him." "What are you going to do, Mike?" "I'll give her a divorce. She doesn't want anything from me, so I'll sign the papers and get rid of her." There was another form she wanted me to sign, but I had already thrown it in the trash. "What kind of form?" asked Paul. "She wants me to give the children up to him for adoption." "This will not happen in this life." Paul shook his head in disgust. "One thing I know for sure. Carslake can kiss my ass. I was supposed to start working for him on Monday. Fuck it, I'll find another job." I signed the divorce papers. The application form to adopt my children ended up in the trash bin like an asshole. Helen tried to beg me, but I didn't give in. In the end, she gave up. At the time of the divorce, Chloe was 10 and Lee was 8 years old. I wanted to take revenge on Carslake, but I didn't want to go to jail because of it. I never showed up for work on Monday. Strangely, no one chased me to do it. Part of my revenge on Carslake happened without my participation. It arose as a result of my conversation with Paul. When the incident became known, most local contractors refused to work with Carslake Construction. They realized that he had messed with me, and as payback, they refused his work. Of course, old Henry found other contractors, but they were cowboys and the work suffered. Several times I was asked to give quotations for the work, but when I found out that it was for Carslake, I didn't even bother sending quotations. 6 months later, my divorce became final. 3 months after this, Helen and Shit got married. I took the kids for a week while they went on their honeymoon. I didn't take the kids to help them. I just decided that a week was better than the weekends I was getting now. What made me angry was my daughter Chloe's question. "Dad, why did you send us to live with Mom and Henry?" "What? I didn't send you. Your mother took you because she doesn't love me anymore. If it were up to me, you could stay here," I replied, assuring Chloe that it was not my decision. This is what I was going to talk to Helen about. When Helen rang the doorbell to pick up the children, she came in all tanned and smiling. The smile disappeared when I spoke to her. "Stop lying and talking nonsense, Helen. From now on, tell your children the truth. If you don't tell it yourself, then I will. They now know that I didn't ask you to take them in. If I could, I would fight with you tomorrow for custody." Helen left in anger. Life as a single man seemed strange to me after being married for so long. Some of my friends tried to set me up on dates, but to be honest, I wasn't in the mood to date anyone. I wanted sex, but I didn't want to go on dates, and I didn't know that soon my life would change again. My neighbors were Gary and Emily. They moved in just after Helen left me. Their house was a bargain for them as it needed a lot of work. Emily worked as a secretary. Gary had recently left the army. We got along well and they seemed like a nice couple. When we saw each other, they chatted with me. Tragedy struck when Gary fell at work and paramedics and a doctor arrived within 10 minutes. Gary was pronounced dead at the scene, and an autopsy revealed that Gary died from a subdural hematoma. Emily was upset and left alone. I offered her friendly sympathy. Gary's parents were dead. Emily's parents were on vacation in Europe. Not wanting to leave her alone, I walked her to my house and poured us both a drink. I listened as Emily cried and told me about her plans for the future. Emily burst into tears and fell asleep on my couch. I covered her with a blanket and slept in a chair in case Emily woke up during the night. The next morning, Emily left just as Helen was dropping off the children. "Glad to see you're not wasting any time, Mike." "Stop it, Helen. The poor woman just lost her husband." Helen looked at me, then turned to talk to the children. Later that day, I explained to them why Emily was leaving the house. Chloe looked sad, and Lee didn't think he had it right. Emily asked me to attend Gary's funeral, which I did. In the UK, all mortgages must be insured, and fortunately, Emily will not be left destitute. This was little consolation considering she had lost her husband. Emily's parents returned from Europe and both spoke to me after the funeral. I assured them that I would look after Emily because besides her work colleagues, I was her only friend. I offered to help Emily as much as possible with any small jobs that needed doing. Nothing major, just things that kept the house in a livable condition. The next time Helen dropped the kids off, she stayed in the car, which suited me just fine since I didn't have to talk to her. Emily and I spent a lot of time together, not as a couple, but more as friends supporting each other. Almost a year later, Lee was playing in the garden while I was cleaning up my work van. I heard voices and turned to see him chatting with Emily. I called out to him and asked him not to be a bore, but I heard Emily say that everything was fine. She was hanging the laundry to dry on the clothesline. "Emily, would you like to have dinner with us today?" "Lee, you can't just invite people to dinner. These are not people, but Emily." We both stood and laughed. I asked Emily if she wanted to join us. "Yes, I would like to. That would be great, thanks." Lee ran off to tell Chloe we had a guest for dinner. I apologized for him being so rude. Emily helped me prepare dinner, and it was clear that she was quite skilled in the kitchen. Emily helped me clean up after dinner and babysat for a while before returning home. "Thanks for dinner, Mike. I liked it very much." "Thank you for accepting the invitation." I hugged Emily goodbye and watched her walk towards her house. Hearing her door lock, I returned to the house. "She's very sweet, Dad." "Is Emily your girlfriend?" Chloe asked me with a smile. "No, Emily is just a friend and neighbor," I answered. But I thought it would be nice if she were my girlfriend. I just hid this thought from the children. Helen picked up the children on Sunday afternoon. I knew they would tell her about Emily joining us for dinner, and I was right. The next time Helen picked up the children, she paid special attention by asking about Emily. "Not that it's any of your business, but Emily is just a friend. Besides, you left me for an asshole, so why are you worried about me?" "I'm not worried, Mike. I just asked, that's all." "Well, yes, you got what you wanted. What I do is none of your business. I didn't get everything I wanted." "No, not all. If you mean I'll let the idiot adopt the kids, forget it. This won't happen, so you can get used to it." "I just thought—" "No, Helen, you didn't think so. You left me for a luxurious life with him. If he wants children, let him have his own. This bastard took my wife and ruined my marriage. There is no way he can adopt these children ever." Helen pouted and drove home. I smiled, knowing I had angered her. I haven't seen Emily for several weeks, partly because I've been so busy. My friend Paul was rewiring a home for a young couple and asked me to make a proposal for a complete plumbing remodel. My offer was accepted, and I had a busy few weeks to get everything completed. While working on the house with Paul, he kept me up to date with news. Carslake still had to use the services of many non-local specialists. Most of the local guys still avoided working for him. When the work on the house was completed, I finally had time to relax. I decided to invite Emily to dinner. She agreed, and we agreed on a time for Saturday evening. When I walked in behind Emily, my breath caught. She was a petite woman with what I called an elf haircut. The dress she was wearing showed off her slender figure, and for the first time, I became interested in her sexually. Dinner went great, and we spent a lot of time talking about our lives in general. Later that evening, I walked Emily to her door. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Mike." I smiled, and before I could say a word, Emily stood on her tiptoes and kissed me. Not a polite peck, but a full, open-mouthed, tongue-in-cheek kiss. Wow, I didn't expect this. I regained my breath with difficulty. "Take me with you again, and we'll see where it takes you." Emily smiled and said goodnight before kissing me politely on the cheek. I asked Emily out again, and this time we ended up in my bed. She may have been small, but my God, she was a sex machine. I don't think I've ever had sex like this. Emily and I spent more and more time together, and eventually she sold her house and moved in with me. The kids thought it was great that I was dating, and I knew they would tell Helen everything. From what Chloe said, her mother wasn't impressed. Damn it, she didn't want me, but Emily did. A year after we first slept together, Emily and I got married. When the children told Helen, she just chuckled and turned away. Emily and I had 2 children. We named the boy Gary and his younger brother Robert. My 2 older children were old enough to drive on their own when they visited me, which meant I had even less contact with Helen. Years passed, and one evening Chloe told me that she was getting married, the night before her boyfriend Josh had proposed to her. As her father, I asked if they needed help financing the wedding. We didn't think it would be needed, but now it is. I looked a little confused until Chloe explained. Henry said he would cover the costs of the wedding. We sat with him and my mother and discussed everything. And then he unveiled a sensation. Henry would cover the costs of the wedding on the condition that he would be the one to lead me to the altar. I said, "No way, it's your job." And Henry said that in this case, he was not going to participate in the costs. Chloe was clearly upset. I was angry at Carslake for pulling such a trick. Emily asked if she could talk to me alone, and we went out into the garden. "Mike, we have what's left of the money from the sale of my house in the bank. Please use it to cover expenses. Chloe deserves it." "I know, Emily, but it's your money." "I can't ask you to spend it on Chloe." "Can. Now go and tell this poor girl that we will cover all expenses." Chloe jumped for joy when I told her the news. We agreed on a budget, and everything they wanted was included in the budget. The next day, Chloe called me to tell me that Henry was furious, and apparently, Helen wasn't happy either. We were sitting in the garden one afternoon when Lee showed up unannounced. He said he needed to leave because he was tired of listening to his mom and Henry fight. "Are they still arguing about the wedding?" Emily asked. "No, this is something else. As far as I can tell, Henry doesn't perform his duties in the bedroom." I burst out laughing. I was glad that Helen left me for someone who couldn't do his job when it mattered. "The walls in the house are paper thin, Dad. I hear them at night. I think Mom is tired of Henry not doing well in bed." We laughed at the situation while drinking beer. Lee stayed the night with us to avoid a fight at home. On Chloe and Josh's wedding day, Helen was unhappy. Chloe told her that she and Henry would sit behind Emily and me. The church service went without any problems. I agreed to have Helen sit at the top table at the reception. Henry sat with Emily, Robert, Gary, and Lee. When all the speeches had been made, the caterers cleared away several tables to make room for dancing. Josh and Chloe started the first dance. Emily and I joined them, as did Helen and Henry. Later in the evening, we were standing at the bar. Gary and Robert were sitting with one of Chloe's bridesmaids and her children. Lee asked Emily if she wanted to dance. I smiled and said, "Come on." Helen took a moment to approach me. It was obvious that Helen had been drinking, and I realized that this would not end well. Look at them together. She looks young enough to be Lee's girlfriend. Even though Emily was the mother of 2 boys, she still looked the same as the first day we met. Helen, on the other hand, has not aged very well and has gained weight. Her dress was low-cut in the back and showed off several rolls of fat. Henry was obese and losing his hair. They were the perfect couple. Don't start, Helen. Jealousy doesn't suit you. Besides, we got divorced, so you no longer have the right to comment on my life. Jealous? Jealous of her? God, she looks like she still has school to go to. I think she'll be fine once she's plumper and has a bust worth talking about. Don't talk about my wife like that. For your information, Emily is more of a woman than you ever were. Helen looked at me in shock. Ask yourself, Helen, when was the last time you had good sex? In general, when was the last time you had sex? I paused for a moment. I had great sex last night, and you know what? Maybe I'll have more great sex today. Helen stood stunned as Henry joined us. You see, Helen, when you left me, you thought you were trading me for something more valuable. Maybe that was the case, maybe not. As for me, I just moved on. I now have my own life, a wife who loves me for who I am, 2 wonderful children in addition to the 2 that I already had. Life for me right now is as good as it can be. Can you say the same? I left, leaving the 2 of them to pretend to be goldfish. Emily and I danced to slow music, and Lee was pulled onto the dance floor by one of the bridesmaids. What happened there in the bar? Emily whispered as we danced. Kiss me, I'll tell you later. We kissed, and I knew Helen was looking at us. When we broke the kiss, I smiled at Helen and she turned away and ordered another drink. Oh yeah, I've definitely moved on. Looking at what I had and what I have now, I think that I also exchanged for something more valuable.
Thanks for hanging out and listening. If you liked the story, hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Make sure to check out our other wild tales right here on the end screen. Catch you in the next story.